I'm live on, ano na. Okay lang ba sa inyo yung sound?
For me, it's good.
Josh, can you start speaking? Para ano?
Good afternoon, everyone. Please settle down for in a few minutes. We're about to start our program.
Okay lang naman, no?
Yeah, sounds okay to me.
Chris, nag-send na ako ng live link.
Try ko rin i-share yung sa videos. Pasabi rin if pangit yung yung sound.
Wait, parang naka-cut off. Naka-cut off ba or sa akin lang? Yung sharing sa ilalim.
The logos are cut on the lower part.
Oh, okay, wait lang.
Abby, may Mentimeter na ba tayo for the IA?
Sa PowerPoint?
Oo.
Yep.
Ano yung code? Paano siya i-access?
Oh, wait lang. Hanapan ko lang.
Itong Youth in Action 2022 Q&A.
Yung sinend ni Mika sa GC?
Yung 17 hours ago, no?
Yung sa Consciousness Month na account?
Oo.
Yeah.
Ayun yun, no?
Yep. Tama ba? Yung code niya ay yung 7148.
Oo. Tama naman.
Okay. Yeah.
Ayun na yung for today, no? Final na yan, no?
Yep.
Parang mas malakas ata ngayon.
Oh, okay.
Okay, papasukin na natin sila. I mean, yung mga IA.
I'm gonna disconnect na from audio, tas I'll go to
Ito lang.
Discord.
So, Abby, cut off pa rin. Yung sa lower na logos. Okay, wait. Let's start.
Wait lang, I'll try again.
Go na lang sa sa Discord. Tapos we'll start, na lang. Doon na lang tayo mag-communicate about sa tech stuff. Hello, we'll start letting in participants in 5 minutes.
All right. Can I just have an audio check? Is my audio clear and well?
Okay,
Can you?
siguro, Abby, let's turn on the ano na lang, music, tapos let's see if okay
Okay.
naman levels. Pero right now, it's clear naman, Josh.
It's clear. Okay. Thank you.
And can you try speaking?
All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's okay.
Yan, it's better na, Abby. And Josh, can you try speaking?
Good afternoon, everyone. Just reminding you of a few house rules. Please turn on your camera if your internet connections permit you to do so. How about that?
Okay,
Or should
okay
I-
na lahat. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, good luck pala before I let in participants. Good luck.
Thanks po. Para sa karapatan ng indigenous people.
Para sa quality, accessible, and relevant education.
Para sa inclusive and sustainable development.
Para sa malinis na pamumuno.
Para sa demokrasya at pagtataguyod ng karapatang pantao.
Para sa buhay at kabuhayan ng mamamayang Pilipino.
Para sa positibong panlipunang pagbabago.
Para sa pagbangon ng ekonomiyang nilugmok ng pandemya at ng korupsyon.
Sa darating na Mayo, nakasalalay sa boto ng bawat isa ang kapalaran ng bansa. Alamin ang kahalagahan ng ating mga boto ngayong Pebrero. Samahan ang UP Economics Towards Consciousness sa ika-43 pagdiriwang ng Consciousness Month, kung saan bibigyang diin natin ang magagawa ng ating mga boto para sa kinabukasan ng bawat mamamayang Pilipino.
Hey guys, I'm Sophia Po and I just want to introduce this brand called CommunePix, where I got this wireless charger which would be so helpful for when I need to charge ASAP. You can find brand new and authentic Apple products from iPhones, MacBooks, iPads, and even accessories at a lower price only at CommunePix.
We talk to leaders. We don't shy away from difficult conversations. we report about disruption and how the latest technology and innovation have changed the way we live.
We told stories about crisis, but also about opportunities that came with it.
This is the Philippines.
And we are ANC.
Kabataan ang maririnig, katotohanan ng mananaig. Huwag dapat kalimutan na ito ang ating laban na kinakailangan natin para sa kinabukasan. Kabataan ang maririnig, katotohanan ng mananaig. Oras na tayo na, botong may mahalaga. Kung hindi ngayon kikilos, kailan pa ba?
Ikonomustahan is eConcepto's flagship program for the 2022 national election. By building a space for voters to listen, discuss, and ask questions on the candidates' plans for the economy, Ikonomustahan is dedicated to elevate the youth's voice and claim the economic futures they want. In this mission, we want to look closer into the economic campaigns of each candidates for various sectors and empower the youth to use their voice and vote to make a difference. eConcepto, economics for everyone. Ever had an economics question but don't know where to go? Meet eConcepto. eConcepto creates community-oriented and relevant content and builds collaborative spaces to open economics for everyone. It's built by the youth, with the youth, and for the youth. On Facebook and other social media platforms, eConcepto pushes out bite-sized content like primers to bring economics closer to you. And this year, eConcepto is bound to grow bigger and better as it launches its own website. So the next time you got an economics question, just head on over to www.econcepto.ph, head on to the infographics section, select the year and category of choice, then voila! Your guide is ready for download. You can also access previous webinars, get the know what's on latest economic issues, and view media features. So, what are you waiting for? Go to www.econcepto.ph. eConcepto, economics for everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am your host, Josh Dautil, and welcome to our day one of Youth in Action, the youth as leaders of change. So may I know, everyone, if you're all on your spot, can I get a thumbs up and a heart reaction if you can see and hear me clearly? Everyone here in the Zoom chat, may I request to, react Zoom, reaction like, heart or applause if you can hear or see me clearly. All right, there's a lot of heart. Thank you so much. So Youth in Action, the youth as leaders of change, is an event presented by UP Economics Towards Consciousness as part of the commemoration of UP ETC's 43rd anniversary, Consciousness Month 2022, entitled The Elections Agenda. But before we start, here's our house rules. So to our Facebook Live audiences, a couple of reminders. This FB Live is an open and free space for discourse, but we do hope that it will be used that way and not to steer hate from our speakers and viewers. Respect must always be observed. Do not spam the comments section. Enjoy and learn a lot, and feel free to share your thoughts here so that we can all learn together other than listening from our speakers. And Consciousness Month 2022 is brought to you by the UP Economics Towards Consciousness, co-presented by Motivo Philippines, Coffee Genie, in cooperation with CommunePix, Coffee Scopes PH, and with special thanks to Polarix. We would also like to thank our special sponsor, Attorney Rowena Guanzon. We would like to recognize our official media partners, ABS-CBN News Channel, Inquirer.net, Now You Know PH, When in Manila. Together with our major organization partners, E-Concepto, UP Alyansa ng mga mag-aaral para sa panlipunang katwiran at kaunlaran, UP Alyansa, UP School of Economics Student Council, UP SESC, UP Psychology Society or UP SciSoc, and our minor organization partner, Ateneo Economics Association, and our publicity partner, Kilos Co Youth. Today's event is endorsed by Office of the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, OVCSA, National Economic and Development Authority, NEDA, Junior Philippines Economic Society, JPAS, University Student Council, USC, Alliance of School of Economics Organization, ASEO, T-Bond Foundation, UP School of Economics Alumni Association, UPSEA. Thank you so much to all our partners who made this event possible. To formally open this program, we call on this year's Youth in Action Committee Head, Ms. Camille Camba, to give us the opening remarks.
Thank you, Josh, for the opening. Let me start my speech by saying we saw how elections are crucial in driving inclusive development through Kapekonomiya sa Balota last February 19. More than ever, this upcoming 2022 national elections would dictate the future of today's youth. We have spent almost 2 years of missed opportunities due to poor pandemic response. We cannot go on another 6 years of such. Hence, we must utilize our right to speak up. I am not sure whether you've experienced this, but youth, especially minors, are stigmatized for speaking up on social and political issues. They continuously urge us to concentrate on our education and leave politics to the elders. As a result, it generates the perception that only eligible voters can participate in election discussions, despite impacting everyone regardless of age. On behalf of the Youth in Action Committee and the UP Economics Towards Consciousness, I would like to welcome and express my sincere gratitude to all our attendees for being with us as we promote youth electoral participation beyond the means of voting. These days, Youth in Action is entitled Youth in Discussion, wherein we discuss how we could utilize the FOI bill and use data analytics in youth electoral campaigns. We highlight the importance of data-driven campaigns as we fight mis- and disinformation. We hope you gain valuable insights from today, and we look forward to meeting you in the upcoming days as we use these insights in learning how to build youth advocacy campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Camille Kamba, for that opening remarks. And I'd also like to take note on how crucial and important this coming election is. We don't want to suffer again for the next coming 6 years, so our vote counts. And as the youth, I hope we become the generation where we put our voices as equal just as another. No social classes, no age group, and such. Now, just to check up on you, just to feel the energy today, may I know in the chat box and on the comments on live streams, how are you feeling all today? Can you let me know in the comments and in the chats? How are you all feeling today? I am extremely feeling hopeful. Aside from this is becoming, a step on achieving a progressive society, I feel like this is also a way to connect with other youth in the Philippines, especially in this coming election. So we have this excited, and we're all excited here, I am sure. So without further ado, allow me to discuss what will happening this afternoon. So Youth in Action aims to create forums for youth to have a better understanding of the various critical issues facing the country today through a series of workshops with our allies to enable everyone to actively take on the role of the youth in society through this initiative. This year, we take it a step further as leaders of change to actively engage and understand how they can provide avenues for discussion and offer opportunities to create proactive solutions, inspired and led by youth to aid in addressing the ills of our modern-day Philippines. In today's event, we will be meeting some of UP ETC's allies and impart their knowledge on relevant topics for us youth. So let's get started. Our first session will be discussing how utilizing the Freedom of Information, or FOI bill, in youth election campaigns and advocacies. Our first allied organization hails from FOI Youth Initiative. The FOI Youth Initiative, or FYI, is a national network of more than 200 Filipino youth and student organizations that call for transparency, accountability, and participation in government through the immediate passage of the People's Freedom of Information Act. Our first speaker is a co-convener of the FOI Youth Initiative, the youth arm of the Right to Know, Right Now Coalition. She graduated from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines with a degree in economics and is currently a communication and research associate in Action for Economic Reforms. With this, let us all welcome and give a Zoom round of applause for Mix Erica Jane Navagas.
Hello, thank you so much, Josh, for that introduction. I asked Camille to please share my slides, please. Camille, is my slide ready already? Am I audible?
Yes, Mix, we can hear you clearly. So we're requesting Camille Kamba and the rest of YAA to set up Miss Erica's slide. So while we're waiting for the setup, how are you today, Mix Erica?
I'm fine. I'm feeling great. I'm so excited for this afternoon's discussion. I'm really excited to be in Zoom again with youth with the same energy and power. Okay,
All
so
right,
thank you so
let's
much.
take us away.
Yeah. So before I start, magandang hapon sa lahat ng mga kasama natin dito sa Zoom at sa mga tagapakinig natin on Facebook. I see that we're live on Facebook. So mula sa FOI Youth Initiative, nagpapasalamat kaming muli sa UP Economics Towards Consciousness for inviting us again to this learning initiative. Very quickly, I just want to say hi to Rio if he's here already. He used to convene FYI when I was just a student advocate back in college. So nice to see you again. Nagkasama kami last year ulit sa economics event din. I think last February then of of 2021. So today, I'm going to give you an overview of our journey in lobbying for the FOI bill. So it was a long journey, I must say, and we'll get into the details later. But after that, I hope that you'll get to appreciate FOI's importance to your advocacies and to you personally, especially now that the official campaign period has started. So next slide, please. Konting introduction lang, FOI Youth Initiative is a coalition of youth organization pushing for the passage of the Freedom of Information bill. So currently it has 100 members composed of student council, school-based organizations, and community youth groups. FYI, as mentioned by Josh later, before in my introduction, that FYI is the youth arm of the Right to Know Right Now Coalition, which is a network of advocates from the academe, labor, youth, civil societies, and media pushing for FOI. So R2KRN is actively introducing its members to the idea of active FOI practice as a way to exercise their right to know and be able to proactively engage public institutions in promoting a culture of openness. So next slide, please. So ano ba tong FOI? What is so-called FOI? Bakit ba natin to pinaglalaban? So madalas naririnig natin sa mga online channels like Facebook, Twitter, or even sa television ang mga balita tungkol sa transaction ng gobyerno pagdating sa ating kalusugan, infrastruktura, agrikultura, at iba pa. So ngayon, panahon ng pandemya halimbawa, nakikita natin ang mga datos na nilalabas ng DOH or Department of Health o kaya ng ating mga LGU, kung ilan na ba yung mga nakatanggap ng bakuna, sino na ba nakatanggap ng kanilang first and second doses o kaya ng booster shot. So ito ay nire-report daily, pwedeng sa kanilang Facebook account o kaya kung anong platform man ang ginagamit nila to inform their constituents. Pero minsan, napapaisip tayo kung sapat ba yung mga datos sa impormasyon na binibigay nila sa atin. Nalalaman ba natin ang ilan ang supply ng bakuna na meron tayo sa ating barangay? Bakit minsan parang nauuna ang mga pamilya ni Mayor? Sino bang mga priority? Alan bang supply ng vaccines na meron ang ating LGU talaga? So sa mga ganitong tanong, pumapasok yung importance ng FOI. So FOI is a fundamental right which guarantees your access to information held by public bodies. So it is an extension also of the free speech. Next slide, please. FOI and free speech are both recognized by international law and mandated by the Philippine Constitution. So our Constitution says the right of the people to information and matters of public concern shall be recognized. So this includes access to official records, the documents, papers pertaining to government transactions, provided, of course, that it shall not put into jeopardy yung privacy and matters of national security. So you might ask, what's in it for me, for you, or for the people kung mayroong FOI? Next. So FOI, or a right-based information disclosure, can all actually empower us, the citizen, and promotes participatory governance. And what is it? And what is the first step towards achieving participatory governance? It is giving people the access to information under the government's custodianship. Okay, actually, FOI also creates a mechanism that will prevent and combat corruption. So FOI is our best recourse to demand accountability from the government. After all, we're giving them so much power. We're paying our taxes. So bilyong piso ang kanilang natatanggap yearly. So binibigyan natin sila ng ganon kalaking power to handle our taxes, ang pera ng taong bayan. It's just right for us to have a tool and to have FOI as a tool to make them accountable. Okay, and lastly, of course, it prevents the proliferation of disinformation or what we call fake news. So with so much information circulating online, with FOI, we can actually do fact check kung tama ba yung mga nababasa o nakikita natin. So in a way, we are empowered as citizens. Okay, next slide, please. So our FOI advocacy has been a long and difficult journey. So as you can see, the first FOI bill was filed in the 8th Congress. So it has gone through 11 Congresses and hindi pa rin siya naisa sa batas. Nandito pa rin tayo sa paglalabi nito. This 18th Congress, so we actually had a glimpse of hope. We are actually happy to have champions in the House of Representatives and partners in government like the PCOO Project Management Office who are moved by the same passion for the FOI advocacy. So dahil doon, for a time, nagkaroon ng movement in the lower house. Nagkaroon tayo ng 4 na HOR Technical Working Group public hearings. Pero hanggang doon na lang siya. And as we all know, the 18th Congress is ending very, very soon. So I'll leave the question, will this be the time to you guys to answer? No? So for the past administrations, we've seen some developments and we achieved small wins along the way. Next slide, please. With the signing of Executive Number 2, Series of 2016, the people's constitutional right to information has been operationalized in the executive branch. So we at the Right to Know, Right Now Coalition, we recognize the EO as a crucial development for the following reasons. So first, the executive branch is the biggest branch of government. No? Pangalawa, our FOI practice finds that among the biggest hurdles were uniform, a speedy procedure for access, which the EO addresses. So with the EO, it includes guidelines on how to file a request, file an appeal kung dininay ka, saan ka pupunta, kung meron mang applicable fees, etc. Okay, so next, using the EO as basis. Sorry, please go back. Please go back to the previous slide. Yeah. Okay, so using the EO as basis, we can actually have a demonstration effect. No? Constitutional bodies, even the Supreme Court, the Houses of Congress, and the LGUs can be lobbied to issue their own administrative orders and guidelines for access to information. So after this forum, you can check to your respective LGUs kung meron ba kayong ordinansa sa FOI, or baka naman magagalit sila pag nagtatanong ka kung magkano ba yung pondong nakalaan sa pagpapagawa ng kalsada nyo, etc. So things like that. And lastly, the EO promulgates and implements a big section covered in the FOI bill for the executive. Also, hindi included dito sa slide ko, but in EO, meron tayong, it mandates that every government agency to have their FOI manual. So dito malalaman, you can use this as guide para malaman kung saan ba yung location and kung sinong responsible office na pwede mong pag-filean ng gusto mong i-request na information. So kagaya ng nabanggit ko kanina, nandito rin yung procedure of filing, pag-file ng appeal, or kung may mga applicable fees ba na makukuha mo sa pag-request. Okay, so next slide, please. Although a welcome development, EO number 2 is nonetheless never enough. So para sa amin, never enough pa rin yung EO. And why kaya? Next slide, please. So may mga limitasyon kasing EO na maa-address lamang ang FOI law. So ang panawagan namin past the FOI law kasi, next slide please, the clarification and narrowing of exceptions. So minsan kasi kahit may EO, pinapamukha sa yung kandahaba-habang listahan ng mga exceptions na hindi mo na alam kung saan pa talaga yung karapatan mong malaman at hindi. So yun. Next, as mentioned earlier, the EO only covers executive branch of the government. So now, when FOI is legislated, it will now include all branches of government, constitutional bodies, and your LGU. So, and next, the inclusion of criminal liability for unlawful denial of access to information. With the EO kasi, walang sanctions for this. So we only have administrative and disciplinary sanctions. And lastly, of course, yung balance between FOI and the data privacy. Okay, next slide, please. FOI joins the yearly conduct of FOI practice of the Right to Know, Right Now Coalition. So yung FOI is an initiative that aims to actively exercise its members' right to information. So member of the coalition organizes themselves and file requests related to their respective advocacies to different government agencies. Excuse me. So what's good about FOI is it's helpful to any advocacy. So may mga kasama kami from the labor sector, those pushing for migrant advocacy, environment, etc. So in doing FOI practice, we use a common template for requesting, monitoring, and documenting requests and outcomes. And also we follow a timeline. Next slide, please. So in doing FOI practice, here are the practical guides kung paano tayo gagawa ng or paano natin gagawin yung FOI practice, no? So in doing FOI practice, you have to identify your purpose and answer the question, why do you want to do it? What do you want to know? Okay, so for example, last year in the conduct of our FOI practice, nabilang ako sa grupo or napasama ako sa Center for Migrant Advocacy. So we were tasked to know kung ano yung kalagayan ng mga OFWs natin sa panahon ng COVID. So mapapaisip ka kung kalagayan or welfare ng mga OFW or migrants workers yung advocacy mo. Saan ba tayong mga ahensya lalapit dapat? So, mapapaisip ka, so it's Department of Foreign Affairs, DOLE, and OWA, di ba? So, because these agencies are responsible for taking care of the welfare of our OFWs. So, we ask them yung mga status ng implementasyon ng mga programa kagaya ng DOLE ACAP o ng mga financial assistance, ilan na ba yung mga nakauwi nating mga workers from abroad, at ilan pa ba yung gusto pang bumalik, paano sila doon, anong sitwasyon nila. So that's an example. So after you answer that question, kung anong gusto mong malaman, ano ba yung gusto mong tanungin sa government, you are now ready to file your request, no? So identify what office. So sa example ko kanina, dun sa OFW, kailangan naming alamin what office from DOLE yung nangangalaga sa welfare ng mga migrants workers natin. So we ask for their contact information. You can search that online, your email addresses, and dun mo isa-send yung request mo. And finally, ngayon, hindi natatapos ito kapag na-sending request mo, no? So you have to track it. Na-receive mo ba ng opisina, sino nakausap mo, and things like that. So yun yung part na tinatrack mo na yung request mo. And then finally, after you have tracked and sent your request, you're now ready to write a report. So this is basically just documenting the entire process para may babalikan ka and ma-review ka sa next round of FOI practice mo. Next slide, please. So this is a simplified version of the steps that I've mentioned. So first is to identify who produces what. So yun yung kung anong opisina ka dapat lalapit kung ang kailangan mo ay ganitong bagay. Then check their manuals. And then prepare your request. Okay, next slide, please. This is the sample FOI letter that we use in the coalition. So it's important, of course, na magkaroon ng specific addressee yung ating letter para hindi nawawala. Also, you have to introduce your organization kung ikaw ba ay individual na nagre-request or pwede rin as a group. And then you have to give details of the request and provide your contact details just in case meron silang clarifications or questions about your request. And lastly, you have to sign your request. Okay, next slide, please. Here's another option in filing a request. So meron tayong tinatawag na eFOI portal. It's managed by the PCOO Project Management Office. So what's good about this portal is kung you can browse previous and successful requests dun sa browse request tab. So for example, ang kailangan mo ay kung ilang LGUs na ang may ordinansa ng FOI and in the past may nag-request na ng ganon. You can access that. So hindi mo na kailangang umulit ulit ng steps, no? So next slide, please. Ito yon yung itong mga impormasyon lang ang kailangan mong ibigay sa portal. Of course, your name, your mobile your email addresses, your company, and what organization you're affiliated with. So since sa portal, medyo limited yung characters na nilalagay natin, you have to make your request specific, no? And then same guide lang, and that you have to give context behind your request. And lastly, yung contact details nga, just so kapag may questions sila and clarifications, nadadirect nila sa'yo agad. Okay, next slide, please. So once you have filed your request, you're now ready to monitor it, no? So sa amin sa R2KRN, we prepare a log sheet. So later on, I will show you the template that we use. So ang next step na natin is what to do when you get your request, no? Dito na papasok yung scanning the document part. So titingnan mo kung kompleto ba, is it in open readable format? What if you are a data person, tas ang binigay nila sa'yo is a scanned document. So mahihirapan ka pa to process the data and all that. So next, ito ba talaga yung ni-request mo o baka naman nang hingi ka ng ganitong, for example, implementation ng isang batas pero iba yung binigay sa'yo. So mga ganong bagay. Hindi lang importante na nabigay na nila sa'yo yung document and tapos na ang kwento. So no, you have to check it for its completeness, quality. And lastly, what do you do when your request is denied? So paano pag deny ka nila? Does this mean end of the world na? No. Hindi ka magmumukmok, girl. You have to check the basis for denial and right for an appeal. Okay, next slide. Ito yung example na FOI request log sheet na ginagamit namin. So recently, the Right to Know Right Now Coalition with FYI, of course, sent a request to COMELEC to ask for the candidate's certificate of candidacy. So in the first column, we put the agency where we sent our request, and then the person we contacted. So that's COMELEC and Bank through the Education Department and Department. Kung merong CC man na nilagay, and the date that you send your request. Nag-send ba kayo through EFOI portal or just the email? In this case, hindi kami nakapag-send sa EFOI portal since walang COMELEC sa portal, no? So dito sa remarks and response column, dito namin nilalagay lahat ng nangyari. So January 25, we sent a follow-up letter, blah blah blah, and then January 27, sino nakausap namin, etc. So those things dine-document namin lahat, no? Okay, next slide please. Ngayon, paano kapag hindi ka pinansin? After that, nagawa mo na lahat ng steps, no? So, nasend mo na lahat ng letter, natama naman lahat ng contact information, you have their email addresses. Anong gagawin natin? Magsisend tayo ng follow-up letter. Dapat makita nila na seryoso ka sa hinihingi mong request, no? So, notes, don't settle with no response. Dapat, you have to follow up. No? Kasi kung hindi mo i-follow up, they might just ignore your email. And then you have to send a follow-up letter request after 15 days have lapsed. So within 15 days, hindi kasama dito yung holidays and weekends. So only the working days lang. Okay, so next. So after that, nag-file ka na and naging successful na yung request mo. But this is optional, yung write a report. So in R2KRN, we do it. So your experience, lalagay mo dito experience, kamusta ang naging proseso, anong observation mo, how long does it take bago mo nakuha, ilang beses ka nilang pinagpasapasahan, ilang opisina yung nakausap mo, things like that. This is basically making kwento of the entire process and your learnings. Next. So, nabanggit na natin ito kanina, ang bakit nga ba importante na pagpasa ng FOI, lalo na ngayon, panahon ng election. So, just to recap, it expands the coverage to all branches of government. It established and institutionalized the infrastructure for FOI, and it institute criminal liability and penal provisions. And it clarifies and narrowed down the exceptions. And lastly, institutionalizes FOI through legislation. Tagal-tagal na natin dito, personan nyo na, sana ipasa na nila. Kasi kung hindi mapapasa this Congress, sana naman sa susunod, ibigay na to sa taong dayan. Kaya napapaisip kami sa coalition, bakit ayaw ipasa? So bakit takot? The advocate and the youth have been here for so long, for the longest of time. If our neighbors from Thailand, Indonesia can make it, why can't the Philippines, di ba? Bakit takot na takot sila sa FOI? Next slide, please. So why do we need to do FOI practice, especially this election season? Alam naman natin, kaliwat kanan ang mga pangako ng mga tumatakbo. And as voters, it is our responsibility to do background check at kilatisin ang mga kandidato kung may credibility ba sila sa kanilang mga sinasabi. So sa amin, sa FYI at R2KRN, we ask these candidates if they are going to support for FOI once elected. Is FOI part of their platform of government or baka naman puro pangako lang? So this way, we hold the candidates to account for statements and promises they make, no, once elected into office. Pero para hindi lang tayo basta pangako, meron tayong document na mahahabol sa kanila kapag naluklok na sila sa pwesto. So as youth, you can also do this. You can write directly to your candidates and ask them if they're going to support your advocacy kapag nanalo na sila. Okay? So when we do this together, we promote civic engagement and move policy into action. Okay, next slide, please. This is just to show you why is it important for us to ask for these things, no? So kami, bakit kailangan namin tinatanong yung certificate of candidacy? As mentioned kanina, we recently filed this request to COMELEC. We asked for the candidate COCs and platform of governance, and why is it important? So makikita nyo dito na pag na-review nyo yung COC, nandun yung personal background ng mga personal information ng mga kandidato, kung anong political party ba sila affiliated, kung saan sila boboto, gaano na ba sila katagal sa Pilipinas, anong trabaho nila, at kung meron ba silang criminal record. Tingin ko ito yung pinaka-importante, yung ma-check natin yung criminal record ng mga kumakandidato. Kasi, of course, for me, I wouldn't vote for someone na merong kaso, di ba? Who would want na magkakaroon ng leader na may question sa kanyang credibility and background. Okay? So, next slide, please. Ito naman, last 8 February, we launched our Sal and Reveal Challenge to the candidates. So, we asked them to release their SALN, support the passage of FOI law, if they are supportive of the relaxing of the bank secrecy law, support the release of their health records where they affect public office. And we hope, and we're currently tracking it, kung sino sa mga kandidato yung tutugon or hindi tutugon sa ating challenge. We're looking actually for volunteers who can help us here. So if you guys would be interested, just message me or your org heads para may directly nila sa amin ang mga volunteers na gustong sumali. Okay, so next slide, please. I'm almost done with my presentation, but before I end, I would like to remind everyone, especially the youth like us, the reason why we are doing this. Okay, so we are the ones who will live in the future built today. Tayo ang magmamana kung ano mang magiging kahihinatnan or magiging itsura ng gobyernong ito. We are the ones who will clean up today's mess. Of course, we require a government that practices transparency, displays accountability measure, and empower its people by providing a platform where they can access and fact-check information, especially in this era of fake news. So gusto natin bukas at malinis, bukas at walang tinatagong gobyerno. Together, let's challenge our candidate to show us na merong slot ang FOI sa kanilang mga agenda para naman ma-reverse natin yung kwento na hindi lang ginagamit ang FOI para habulin sila o ilabas ang mga baho nila. So, but it's actually a tool to empower us, especially the youth, by letting us acquire knowledge and information na sa kanila mismo manggagaling lamang. So, maraming salamat po, and I hope you guys can join this initiative. We're open to volunteers. Just message us. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that insightful talk on the FOI bill and how it connects the election campaigns and advocacies. Mix Erica Jane Evagas. Can we give them again a Zoom round of applause? Because that was so brief. That was so It's so cohesive, to be honest. And it's particularly interesting on how it was very long. Like I couldn't imagine it was way back in 11th Congress. I just feel like I'm playing Tetris or like Farmville on Facebook by that time. So it's just crazy. And I feel like, bakit ba sila takot? I love particularly that line. Bakit ba sila takot? What are they fearing? Or why are they, succumbing in fear of not passing this law? Kasi for us, the youth, together as Mix Erica have been telling us, knowledge is power. And to have knowledge, acquiring this knowledge towards our government, our candidates, and even to ourselves, it will boost us in many fields and aspects in our life. So again, thank you. Thank you, FYI. And please note, I'm reiterating to everyone that they are open for volunteers. So there you can find them on the lower left part of the slides in Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, as a blog and email. So that's it. Thank you again, Mix Erica. So before we move on to our last discussion, Youth in Action Day 1 Alliance Day integration will be going on a short 5-minute break. Please stay tuned.
With several leaders of economies today reminded APEC leaders to focus on economic synergy and cooperation on this year's APEC.
Welcome to Boracay, the Philippines' most famous beach.
We have covered the journey of our young democracy. In ANC, we were witnesses to the defining moments of Philippine history that influenced the world.
To the service of the nation.
We talk to leaders. We don't shy away from difficult conversations.
ANC Leadership Series.
We don't just tell stories. We tell you why they matter. We sift through the noise and arm you with facts.
We report about disruption and how the latest technology and innovation have changed the way we live.
We told stories about crisis, but also about opportunities that came with them. This is the Philippines.
And we are ANC.
ating laban na kinakailangan natin para sa kinabukasan. Kabataan ang maririnig, katotohanan ng mananaig. Oras na tayo na, boto mo'y mahalaga. Kung hindi ngayon kikilos, kailan pa ba?
Para sa karapatan ng indigenous people.
Para sa quality, accessible, and relevant education.
Para sa inclusive and sustainable development.
Para sa malinis na pamumuno.
Para sa demokrasya at pagtataguyod ng karapatang pantao.
Para sa buhay at kabuhayan ng mamamayang Pilipino.
Para sa positibong panlipunang pagbabago.
Para sa pagbangon ng ekonomiyang nilugmok ng pandemya at ng korupsyon.
Sa darating na Mayo, nakasalalay sa boto ng bawat isa ang kapalaran ng bansa. Alamin ang kahalagahan ng ating mga boto ngayong Pebrero. Samahan ang UP Economics Towards Consciousness sa ika-43 pagdiriwang ng Consciousness Month, kung saan bibigyang diin natin ang magagawa ng ating mga boto para sa kinabukasan ng bawat mamamayang Pilipino.
Hey guys, I'm Sophia Paul and I just want to introduce this brand called Commune Pix, where I got this wireless charger which would be so helpful for when I need to charge ASAP. You can find brand new and authentic Apple products from iPhones, MacBooks, iPads, notepads, and even accessories at a lower price only at CommunePix.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me again? Can I get a thumbs up and a heart reaction? Here in Zoom, if you're back in your stations. All right, a lot of you are here again. So we will not delay any further. Now that we have all recharged, I hope you still remembered what Mix Erica discussed and its impact on elections and the youth. For now, prepare all your questions for our open forum later this afternoon, and someone from the YEA team will also send the Mentimeter link in the chat box for the access of anonymous sending of questions. It's now time for our last facilitator this afternoon, who will be discussing the role of data analytics in elections. Asia Pacific Youth Data Society, or AYDS, is composed of driven young professionals and university students from different industries and backgrounds who aim to promote data-driven decision-making across organizations, guided by its motto, creating change through data. It aspires to make data science fun and for everyone. Our speaker this afternoon took up his bachelor's degree in economics at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, with focused units on European languages and Spanish. In his university years, he was part of his college organizations, UPOBEM, UP ECOSOC. Sorry, may I remind again our participants to please mute your microphone. All right, apologies for the distraction. Now again, continuing, in his university years, he was part of his college organizations UPOBEM, UP ECOSOC, UP Alianza, and our very own UP ETC. He first worked as a research and communications associate of Action for Economics Reform, and afterwards served as a technical and executive consultant to the president and CEO of the Natural Resources Development Corporation. Currently, he works as a senior business analyst for Ring Central, a US-based cloud communications company offering collaboration tech tools to numerous enterprises worldwide. On the side, he pursues his passion for data as a project Sparta Scholar for Data Science of the Department of Science and Technology, DOST, and serves as the founding executive director of the Asia Pacific Youth Data Society, AYDS. His focus is on the issues of environment, finance, and youth empowerment. Please, I am very pleased to introduce everyone. A round of applause for Mix Rio Daya.
Hi everyone, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Before I begin, I think I have with me, I would like also to introduce one of our members, if Mabel is here. Mabel, are you
here? Sorry, Mix, your voice is a bit muffled on my end.
Hello? Hello? Could you hear me now?
Yeah, you're clear now. We can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have with me actually one of our members as well. She's Mabel. I'm not sure if she's here already, but yeah, thanks Mabel for joining us here today. So for today, I was asked to share about the topic role of data analytics in elections. All right. So what are we going to talk about for today? Next slide, please. All right, so I have here three topics that I would like to impart on. First is Of course, we'd start with having a basic and importance of data analytics. And then second would be an implication of a data-driven election. And last but not the least, of course, is using data in advocacy. And I believe we are joined here by numerous youth as well, representing different youth organizations, correct? All right. Okay. So I think our good host was able to introduce me already, but in summary, what I do now is basically to provide insight and analysis to our different stakeholders of the company and enable them for decision. Next. All right, so let's start already with the basics and importance of data analytics. So when you try actually to research and to Google what is data as it is, you will encounter a lot of possible terms and a lot of possible definitions. But I've tried to copy here the most basic definition that you'd come up, and the first that you'd come up when you try to Google what is data. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, data are facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. So I've put in bold facts and statistics. Why? Because facts and statistics could be represented in many forms, in different forms, such as when you look at the left-hand side, it could be A, B, or C, which are your characters, which are your words, right? Or on the other hand, it could also be 1, 2, 3, or your numbers. In data science, you could actually refer to this more formally as your qualitative and your quantitative data. Qualitative is your words. These are usually the information that you use for attributes, such as describing the color of your hair. Could be red, could be black, could be brown, color of your eyes, or describing simply the length. You could categorize it as short, medium, large, etc. So in other words, qualitatives are usually used for describing using words and characters. That's the first qualitative data. Whereas the second type of data is what we call and what we refer to as the quantitative data. From the word itself, quantitative, quanti, meaning to say quant or numbers. These are usually the data that you frequently encounter. For example, if you're going to ask somebody, what is your age? If somebody says, I am 10 years old, then 10 is already your quantitative data. Or as simple as, what year are this certain number of students are already right now? Some of you might say that you are you're year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, or whatnot. You get the point. Those are your quantitative data whenever you use your numbers. These are the most frequent types of data. But under which, there are actually other types and subtypes of data that you could refer to. For example, a yes or no could be categories, right? Which we also use as part of data. But for the sake of discussion today, we try to simplify it by acknowledging that there are two types, quantitative and qualitative data. Next, please. Now that you know that we have facts and statistics, and now that you know that there are two types that could provide you these numbers or letters or words, what I usually say or what I try to, how I simplify it whenever I am asked, oh, what is data, Rio? What I say is data is equal to your information or insight. How so? Because your data provides you ideas. Your data provides you insights and information on a certain question or on a certain property. For example, a while ago, we were discussing how would you describe the color of your eyes? You could describe it to me as black. You could describe it to me as brown, or you could describe it to me. Some they say has green eyes, right? I mean, whenever you try to answer my question, whenever you provide the answers already, you're actually giving out information and insight already. But the greater question to ask is, Rio, what now? What now, or what is next after you have this information or insight? Next slide. Now, this is, I think, and in my opinion, the greater part of our data is, or why data is important. Because after you have your data and you already have your information, the greater part is how you would be able to use this information for your decisions and your actions. And this data actually goes a lot and a long way. I mean, you'd be able to use this in different things. I'll give you some simple examples. Example, you wanted to know whether you could still spend for an item. For example, this vacation, you want to buy a new, say, iPad or another gadget. What type of information do you need in order for you to know whether you could buy it or not? Of course, you need to know your savings. How much do you have? Or from the previous month, how much were you able to save? And that's already an application of your data. It will be able to empower you to decide whether you should pursue your acquisition or your buying of your gadget, of your new gadget, right? Next also is, for example, in a more work related, or when you go out there and start working already, usually data is used by your decision makers in trying to understand the performance of your business, such as how did we perform last quarter? I mean, was it higher than the previous quarter? Were the sales higher from the previous year, etc., etc.? And using that information, your management or your stakeholders now would be able to decide what would be their new goals or what would be their new action given that information. Or in a more relatable sense, for example, you are pursuing or courting somebody or a partner, a prospect partner, and you when for example your friend told you that, oh, that person isn't interested to you. That's your information that that person is not interested to you, and it will definitely affect your decision making whether you should pursue or not pursue that person at all, right? So in other words, to put it simply, why data is important, because data provides insights or information, and these insights or information enable your decisions and actions. All right, I hope we're clear with that. Next, please. Now, the second part of our discussion today is trying to understand the implications of data-driven elections. So on your screen, you'd be able to see probably these are some of the things, or you might have encountered this already, seen this on your feed or on television when you watch the news. And these are just some of the usual things that we try to understand whenever we talk about elections. And these are actually all related to data. Okay. Next, please. But for the sake of discussion, we'll be talking about three main implications of how data-driven elections are being run. In other words, how data are being used in elections. We have surveys, the first. Second is for political mapping. And third is for public relation analytics. Next, please. We start with surveys. Well, what the survey does? What it does is that it provides insights on voters' preference or awareness. For example, using your survey, you would be able to know which region is a certain candidate strong or most preferred, or which class of people are the primary supporters of a certain candidate. What your survey does is it provides you the insights or information of your voters' preference and or awareness. Awareness because you could also frame your survey as simple as, are you given this name? Could you tell or answer whom are you familiar with? And your survey would be able to tell you already those insights. Now, who conducts this? Basically, these are usually conducted by statistical and research institutions. In the Philippines, for example, we know commonly Pulse Asia Research and SWS as the primary surveyors that we usually have during elections or campaign period. But there are also informal types of surveys that are being conducted online or even on ground. And we kind of want to caution actually against those types of surveys because while it provides insights or input on how or who are the preferred candidates of your population are, we have certain methodologies that we try to adhere in framing our surveys because the last thing that we want to happen is that we provide a biased survey, an inaccurate survey. And once we have an inaccurate and a biased survey, it defeats the purpose of trying to get the truth, right? Of trying to be able to see what's the current pulse percent of your population, your voters. Now, what are the potential uses of your survey? On a perspective of your candidates or your political organizations or formation, firstly, it's actually used for strategy recalibration. For example, assume that a certain candidate is losing the voters' preference on a certain region, then more likely your campaign managers would decide or would recommend to focus on that region or to conduct initiatives that would increase your candidate's awareness to that region. So that's an example of strategy recalibration. Then also, your surveys are also used to evaluate impacts of performance. As you guys might already know, during elections, we have different forums and debates that our candidates attend to. And your surveys are sometimes used actually as an indicator whether your candidate or whether that event had a significant impact to your candidate. Regardless of who your preferred candidate is or are, the survey is actually one of the tools that we use in analyzing whether a performance of your candidate has had impact on his voters' preference because, for example, your candidate was good on surveys or forums, then a logical assumption would be that it might impact positively the voters' preference for your candidate. And how would you gauge that? Using your survey. You'd be able to verify your assumption. For example, your candidate increased or not increased at all. So that's for survey as one of the implications of a data-driven election. Next, please. The second is political mapping. What does political mapping do? It provides insights on likeliness to support based on previous performance or data. Usually, these are attributed to locations because it's mapped to begin with, right? You would be able to garner insights by state, by region, by class within certain locations, and etc. And these are actually very, very useful in a lot of ways, and you'd be able to see it later. Who conducts these? Well, statistical and research institutions as well, but it can also be used internally or prepared internally by your political formation. What are potential uses? First is campaign prioritization. For example, uh, given the historical performance of your political formation on certain locations, you already have an initial idea on what the voters' preference from that location is. Therefore, a logical or a strategic campaign manager would recommend you would be able to recommend rather locations to prioritize or locations to go to. Either one, since you already know that this location is an avid supporter of your formation, then campaign manager might decide not to focus on that location and instead reallocate resources to another one, which your political formation may not necessarily be preferred or strong at. Or another insight using location or political mapping could provide your campaign manager is if your candidate is already strong to that location, then you would be able to secure or will be able to prioritize those strong drivers of your voters' preference. I mean, you would usually like to maintain that strong base, and you'd usually like to go there and ensure that your location would still vote or vouch for your candidate or political formation. So that's how we use political mapping for campaign prioritization. The next, also, apart from strategization, is turnout prediction. In data science, this is what we call predictive analytics because there are professionals that are actually hired by different political formations that would be able to provide you initial modeling to predict certain turnout. While these are not actually 100% definitive, this already gives you future scenario or likely scenarios, assuming and using the previous historical performance or data. When you, for example, if you already know that for example, 10 years worth of data and how and who they usually support to, you'd be able to predict already based on those information what would be the likely outcome if if it's the tariff variables or there are no changes to the performance. But of course, assuming that you have changes to your performance, you have changes in your campaigns, you have changes on your strategy, you'd be able to input those strategies and input those assumptions to your model, and you'd be able to see or predict a likely scenario that would happen given all your inputs. So that's how turnout prediction is used, and that's one of the implications of data-driven for your political mapping. Next, please. And of course, last but not the least, this is very, very, very commonly used during elections. One of the implications is your PR analytics. What do we mean by this? Basically, it provides insights on engagement and reach of posts or initiatives. I think most of us, most of the youth are already at one point in time familiar that whenever you post on Facebook for your organization, you would be able to know how many people were reached by your certain post or how many were engaged because of your initiative. But on a elections perspective or an election setting, this would actually provide insight on how effective your campaign strategies or initiatives are. Who usually conducts these? Public relations team, marketing officers, campaign managers, etc. These are usually internal and invested on by different companies, corporations, or even your campaign managers. And usually your candidate or your political parties actually hire a public relations team, experts, organizations that handle this types of work. And what are the potential uses? First is campaign targeting. Uh, Remember a while ago, we talked about how political mapping provides you insights on where your candidates are strong or where your candidates are most preferred. Using that information, you'd be able to utilize PR analytics in targeting the locations of where your initiatives would appear. Example, in the context of Philippines, you know that your candidate is kind of not strong in, say, Visayas region. A logical decision then of your campaign manager or your PR team would be to target people from Visayas region and ensure that your different initiatives or different posts are able to appear at the feeds of or social media, different social media tools of your voters, right, from those locations. So that's an example of campaign targeting. But on the other hand, actually a negative example of this would be black propaganda. How does your public relations team utilize campaign targeting for black propaganda? Well, if they already know that this certain candidate is strong or your opponent is strong on this certain location, negatively, what your PR team would do is to target the black propaganda on those locations, so that objectively, what that tries to achieve is that to reduce credibility, to tarnish reputation, and ultimately to reduce votes. And I understand, or I'm sure that you guys were able to encounter those types of engagements online. All right. Now, for last, types of examples for peer analytics is evaluation of initiatives. What do we mean by this? Well, you could actually also understand or try to see the performance of your different initiatives using PR analytics. Example, if you use a certain video and your candidate is discussing a certain issue, you'd be able to get that insight whether this type of initiative is strong using PR analytics. Because if your for example, if your post reach a lot of people than usual, then it more likely means that, oh, my certain post or my certain engagement is effective. And it would be able to provide your insight on your future action. Whether, oh, let's replicate this similar types of initiatives, or this post was not effective, let's abort it altogether. Those are the types of actions that are able to be conducted because of your data or your information from your PR analytics. So again, those are your different implications of data-driven elections. You have your surveys, you have your political mapping, and your PR analytics. Next, please. Ultimately, in order to win, we or your different campaign formation would want to be as scientific and accurate as possible. And that's actually what your data does. That's the reason why your political parties invest millions or lots of money through surveys or on PR analytics or on political mapping or those that are able to provide this insight because it makes decision making more accurate and scientific, and it actually provides you insights that would help how you run the campaign. So that's to sum it up what the implication of data driven election is. Next please. Now the last part of our discussion for today is how you would be able to use data in youth advocacy. A while ago, we discussed how data is being used in the context of elections. It's kind of similar, but now we have a different objective that we want to achieve. I have here three. First is that data provides baseline for your performance. Second is it enables you to decide for your target. And third is it helps you become more reliable and accurate for lobbying. Next, please. First is that it provides baseline for performance. How or what's the potential use of this? It answers actually your question, where are we currently at now? Especially youth advocacy or non-governmental organizations or campaign groups usually have an advocacy that you want to push forward. As simple as zero hunger movement or as simple as reduction of carbon footprint. Before you're able to push forward your advocacy, of course, you must know where you're currently at. You must know how or where the world is performing right now. For example, if you want to reduce carbon footprint, then you must at least have your information on how much carbon footprints are being generated right now and where are your top contributors for it so that you'd be able to understand your issue and you'd be able to understand your performance of your advocacy. And I put here actually sustainable development goals because this is very, very interesting. When you try to visit actually the page of UN SDG, in each sustainable development goal, there are actually metrics of performance of where the current or where the current metric or goal is at, such as in education, such as in uh, safe and clean water. I mean, you'd be able to see their indicators that would provide you information or insights or on how we're performing as a nation. Next, please. Related to the first, once you already have your baseline, the data would actually enable you to decide for your target. What are the potential uses? It answers your question, where do we want to arrive? I mean, where do you want to be at? Now that you know that you have X number of people that haven't finished education, then a likely target would be, oh, let's reduce those numbers by this amount. And that would be your target, right? Or in the example of carbon footprint, you'd be able to identify how much or whom or which are the countries that should be prioritized and should really offset or should really reduce their carbon footprint because you have your data already and you would not need to target all. I mean, you would not just arbitrarily target different nations, but rather because you have your pieces of information, you'd be able to prioritize which countries or which location should you target for your campaign. And that's a very, very important tool that you could use in your advocacy. Last but not the least, next please, is that it helps you become more reliable and accurate for lobbying. Coming also from youth organizations myself, lobbying is very important because through lobbying, you're able to influence decision making of whom? Your state, your policymakers. And why do we want to affect the policy? And why do we want to ultimately enact certain laws that is related to our advocacy? because it's one of the most effective ways to ensure longevity of your campaign, to ensure longevity of your advocacy. For example, uh, one advocacy close to my heart is on the issue of Sinta. And in fact, the UPEPC was one of the primary organizations who pushed forward for this law in 2012. Syntax, it's a combination of your knowledge of economics and health. Why? Because the basic assumption of in economics is actually that when you increase the price of a certain good, you would decrease the preference or the consumption for that certain good. And how was it used in the context of synthesis? By increasing the price of certain commodities which prove to have negative impact on health of your population, your likely expectation is that you'd be able to affect the consumption of that certain good. And your data would be able to provide you that information that indeed there was a decrease in the consumption of your tobacco products because of higher prices of your tobacco. And that's how we were able to become accurate. We had the benchmark on where we're currently at, how many people are consuming it, and we were able also to evaluate where we're currently at because we were able to monitor the data of how much we're reduced. At the same time, on the health aspect of it, you're able to predict also how many people, how many diseases, or how many supposed to be uh, sick people that will be affected by your tobacco were averted or were not affected just because you were able to affect your decision making already and not to consume that tobacco. Because I think when you go there, when you based from my experience going to Congress and on Senate, or even engaging your different policymakers, they would not just easily believe what you're saying if it's not something credible. They wouldn't just empty or readily assume that what we're saying is true because we have different perspectives, and your state and your government is actually is like a referee of different competing interests. Having worked in the government, that's actually one of the insights that our executive has told us. You know, in a society, you have different competing interests. You have different advocacy. But at the same time, you also have different stakeholders. And both the lobbyists, those that you're lobbying, and those that you are fighting against are constituents of your government. But how would you be able to convince or persuade your government or your state towards your advocacy? It is through data. It is through accurate and useful information. Because if you're able to back up your claims and you're sure that this was the impact of your research or of your advocacy, then you'd be able to convince your policymakers to act otherwise. And that's the importance of using data for your youth advocacy. Again, using data in youth advocacy, you'd be able to use it on three things. The last being more effective on lobbying. Second, you're able to set up your target. And of course, first is you're able to benchmark or have an understanding of where you're currently at. Next, please. To end, I'd like actually to leave you guys with this saying by Lewis Carroll, but I kind of modified it. As a data enthusiast, I'd always say that if you don't know where you're going, how would you know when you arrive? And it is through data, it is through this information, you'd be able to know where you're currently at and empowers you to know where you'd like to go so that you'll be able to know when you're ready there and were able to achieve the objective of when or where you want to arrive. So that ends up my presentation for today. Thank you and have a good day to us all.
All right, thank you again, Mix Rio Dayo, for that. I don't know about you, but I definitely learned a lot in this modern times. Like everything is in one tap away. We can have access to this data, and we never know how verified it is. And I love how elaborated in the recent talk on how important data is and taking courses of actions backed by data. But still, we are encountering problems of how accurate this data is, right? So I think we have more questions on that. So before that, thank you, Mix Rio Daya of AYDS. And now that we have heard of the discussion of the FOIs, or Freedom on Information, and also the data analytics in youth advocacy and election, we will be giving our audience the chance to ask and address certain inputs they got from the talk. At this point, I'm sure our attendees are eager to ask our speakers some questions, and we are now opening the floor for your inquiries. You may send in your questions through menti.com, so open menti.com and input the code 71484539, or using your mobile, please scan the QR code presented on screen. So you wish to have your question answered by a particular speaker, please indicate it in your questions as well. Otherwise, any of the speakers may be free to answer. So we will not delay any further. Let us begin the open forum and Q&A portion. So keep coming the questions on Menti, and I already have here. So can we spotlight both Mix Rio and did I cut off? Oh, sorry. It's Mix Erica. Hello, Mix Erica and Mix Rio. We will have now our first question. So this is about a while ago on the FOI. So Mix Erica, how do the advocates of FOI actually cement the goals of FOI, given the access to information can be disguised under many different reasons or justifications? Again, Mix Erica, how do the advocates of FOI actually cement the goals of FOI, given the access to information can be disguised under many different reasons or justifications?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. So, as I've mentioned a while ago, we've been here for our fight for FOI has been very long now, since it started in 8th Congress. So we're very lucky actually to have partners actually from different coalitions and also from government who are actually helping us in this advocacy. So in a way, it gives us energy and motivation to keep going from this campaign, no? Especially from the help of PCOO. We're actually happy to have partners like them who are moved by the same passion for FOI. So that answers the question.
Yes, thank you again so much, Mix Erica, for that. And also, this is the next question. It's a bit general, but I think this heavily lean on, again, the FOI, but you can answer as well, Mix Rio. So what steps are you taking in the inclusion of criminal liability for inaction, given that there seems to be no burden on part of the authorities to disclose information? So again, what steps are you taking and the inclusion of criminal liability for inaction, given that there seems to be no burden on part of the authorities to disclose information?
So R2KRN has actively participated in the technical working group discussion happened this Congress. So that's I think last year in September. So we've submitted our draft proposal of the bill. So we've included provisions of sanctions for the unlawful denial of data. So that's.
All right, thank you for that. So just a clarification, the RT, sorry, can you repeat it again?
Right to Know, Right Now Coalition.
Right to Know, Right Now
Which
Coalition.
the FOI Youth Initiative is part of. So we're the youth arm of the R2KRN.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So I hope to anyone who answered, who asked that question, it was answered very well. So again, thank you, Mix Erica. Now we have a question specifically for Mix Daya. So as someone who has extensive knowledge in data analytics, do you think that more legislation should be introduced to curb or at least regulate the utilization of social media for political campaigns. And there's a context given that it can be argued that there is a layer of plausible deniability when it comes to releasing statements on social media.
Well, actually, before we were able to answer that question, we have a burden to address, which is data science itself is not a very common field or domain that is accessible to a lot of us. And it's actually one of the reasons why we in the AYDS formed ourselves. We want to make data science as accessible as possible and as laymanized as possible, because right now the discussion is actually left or being left with your uh, technical people, with those that are able to process and analyze data. And that shouldn't be the case, because the power of data, like what we've discussed a while ago, goes a long way and it affects a lot of us in the society. And you wouldn't be able to enact, I mean, you would be able, before we arrive at answering whether there should be laws, I think there is a need first to address the burden of making data science more accessible to a lot of people, so that by the time that we are able to discuss what policies or laws we should implement, we are already sure that we are on the same page. Because the last thing that we want to happen is to enact a policy that is half baked. And based on experience, there are a lot of policies that are half baked and are actually not, and we could consider, in fact, um, not thoroughly researched because it is not clearly understood. One example, I am sure you guys might have encountered on Facebook, the US Senate inquiry on Mark Zuckerberg regarding data privacy. And there, in fact, were a lot of memes there where our lawmakers were made fun of because they were asking highly technical terms that they're not super familiar with. So I think before we are able to decide or we are able to enact this policy, we should promote first the laymanization or making more accessible data science or the knowledge itself of data. Because if we're not able to do so, then we are risking, again, the implementation or enacting of a policy that is half baked and is not thoroughly researched. That's my answer.
All right, thank you, Mix Rio. And I just like to have an insight as well on that. As member of the LGBTQIA plus community, recently we also have in the Philippines appointing of the same-sex union, civil union. But then again, the knowledge about it, the SOGI, isn't very, common for people and even to our lawmakers. So the tendency is that marriage is holy and stuff like that. So a lot of problems came in because it's half baked. The policy is not, for masa. Hindi naiintindihan ng masa, hindi naiintindihan ng tao kung para saan yung batas. So for our data-driven analytics to be legislated or something, we need, again, from Mr. Mix Dayaw, make data science fun and for everyone. Wow, nag-segue ng data. Segue ng line. Anyway, yun lang. Okay, thank you so much again for that. We have a question that is very general, so anyone can answer. Who will benefit from the current turmoil our country is facing today due to bad leadership? Like, who will benefit, or I think the question is, who benefit the most right now from the current turmoil our country is facing today due to the bad leadership?
I'll go first na lang. So to answer that very quickly, I guess it's very obvious that it's us, the youth, who will inherit this government in the future because we're stakeholders in the future of this country. So that's a quick question. I answer for that.
All right, thank you, Mix Erica. Next, Mix Ria.
Who benefits the most from the turmoil? Well, definitely the perpetrators of the turmoil. I mean, and I agree with what Erica said that the problems that we face today are actually generational. I mean, I always share about syntax because it's an advocacy close to my heart. The syntax passed in 2012, but it took decades of years before that legislation or that law got passed. So in other words, we as a youth has an opportunity actually to address different generational issues that we have, and uh, and that's why I actually appreciate this type of event that aims to empower the perspectives of the youth, because the youth ultimately would inherit, like what Erica said, those problems, and these are generational problems. Poverty is not just a one-time instance of problem. Gender discrimination has been inherently there for a very, very long time. Same with political corruption and other types. Religious discrimination, those are generational problems that have existed since time immemorial. And us youth has an integral role to constantly challenge this stigma, to constantly plan and engage people so that one day, I mean, step by step, no matter how long it might take, we have an opportunity to change the narrative and ensure that the next generations wouldn't inherit those backward thinking. And I always believe that the youth is very, very resistant, and it's very, very how I would say it, fresh, and is not afraid to challenge this old stigma. So that's what I believe.
I'm sorry, just to clarify my answer, I misunderstood the question, but I agree with Rio. My take was I misunderstood the question as who's on the downside end of the bad leadership. So I said it's the youth, but I think to ask who is going to benefit from this is it's very obvious who will benefit from this, no, and as I've mentioned, it's the youth na nasa downside of this bad leadership.
Yes, yes. Especially us, I think, together, everyone in this call and everyone watching us on live stream, as early as our teenage year, there is this sort of pressure already to be well informed, to be well rounded in terms of politics and societal issues. It's not a bad thing. Di ba nga sabi nila, pag namulat sa katotohanan, kasalanan na ang pumikit. And right at this moment, we're all having our eye-opener moment. And hopefully, as micro efforts so that we're having individual impact, individual influence, it can be a ripple effect to have a change in this coming election. So thank you for that again, both of you. I love the insights. All right. So we have here, I think this focus more on data analytics as well. So how can the youth ensure that the data-driven elections will not be suspected as quote unquote manipulative, and how will it avoid the troll? So again, how can the youth ensure that the data-driven elections will not be suspected as quote-unquote manipulative, and how will it avoid the trolls?
Just to clarify, was the last part avoid the trolls?
Yeah, how will it avoid the trolls?
Well, to answer that, it's a matter of constantly engaging. I mean, there is no other way than to reassert the truth and reassert on what you guys believe in. Because at the end of the day, like what I said a while ago, we have competing interests in the society, and it's never going to change even in the future. We would always have different stakeholders which pushes forward different agenda at the end of the day. May it be on the context of elections or in advocacy, we have different people which would invest and which would devote resources just to push forward their agenda and make sure that their narrative is what is believed as. Their narrative is what's being heard. And the role of the youth is to challenge any questionable narrative, because it's connected to what we've answered a while ago. Who benefits from these fake narratives or on this backward thinking narratives are precisely the people who have malverse or negative intentions or perverse interests for our society. And the only way for us to be able to challenge that is to constantly engage. You know, there's a saying, um, online. I forgot who was it, but it goes like the most the one who benefits silence is actually not us. The more, I mean, is not the one that is trying to pursue change. The one who benefits silence is actually the perpetrator of violence, the perpetrators of misinformation. Because at the end of the day, if we will not speak or assert our truth, how would it become the truth if a greater narrative is being heard? So I think that's why it's very important to talk about the truth, to talk about stories, to make it out there for it to be recognized. Because if we keep in silence, I mean, if we know the truth and we want to challenge and want to engage, if we do not engage, then there's only one narrative that will prevail. So I think that's how we could go.
Yes, and staying in neutrality sides with the oppressors. So in times of truth or history revisionism, false news, fake news, and this backward propagandas that we have in the society, if we don't go against it, we don't resist it, we don't stand by our truth, it's just gonna continue like a vicious cycle. So thank you for that. Now I just have actually a personal inquiry. Since we've talked about the trolls, Mix Rio, do you think we can penalize them or like put a stop and end to this for this troll or like farm trolls and what they call the like?
Actually, that's one of the most common questions I kind of get asked also. I mean, on what's my perspective on Facebook trolls. But I think before we are able to arrive at an answer for that, we must be able to understand the context of it. These so-called trolls are actually a sum of big organizations. I mean, these are organizations who have power. These are organizations who have funding and resources. That's why they're able to continue what they're doing. And if we're looking at a legal policy, this is very sensitive because we have to be able to identify the fine line between censorship and irresponsible information or libelous accusation for that matter. And for the part of libels per se, we actually have an existing law for it, but is it currently being used? Is it currently being maximized? And the second question to answer is that how you'd be able to monitor, how would you be able to ensure that your policy is being enforced? I think a good concept that we must be able to understand is that policy making is not the end of the story. A greater part actually of the story is how you'd be able to enforce it. I mean, it's very, very easy to implement or enact a certain law penalizing trolls. Say, like, when you're proven to be a troll, either you ask that troll to pay a fine or to let that troll be incarcerated or whatnot. But there are different realities that we must be able to acknowledge, and that there are mechanism challenges, implementation challenges, if we're going to come that route. So in my opinion, it is better to choose a more proactive approach. Say, example, we have here Rappler, for example, they have a fact-checking initiative that aims to highlight what are the fake news and how it could be corrected. Or you're able to probably be able to encounter Facebook is also doing on the bottom part of your post, there is like has this been validated? That's a recent initiative you're trying to do. But this is not enough. And this is not the end of the story. So before uh before we arrive whether policy is the best route to take, I think we go back to we need to enforce the truth first. I mean, we need to be able to counter fake news. We need to be think of mechanisms that will ensure that the trolls will not prevail. And you would not be able to do that by just having that policy. It requires a lot more. I mean, it's the same way as dealing the issue of poverty. You wouldn't address the issue of poverty by just simply giving money to those who are in need. We need system that would ensure that they will not go back to the very same reasons why they became poor to begin with. So that's how multifaceted each issue and each advocacy should be looked at. We shouldn't just look at it on a legalistic perspective, but rather it's a systematic approach that is very much essential. And right now, we have a long way to go. I mean, to begin with, those that are opposing fake news aren't even united yet. I mean, we have different competing groups that we want to arrive at. We need to collaborate. We need to join this sporadic effort so that the direction that we are able to take is something that we would all agree on. And that would be something that would really be effective on ground. Because again, the last thing that we want to happen is that there's a policy, but the policy is not being enforced.
All right. Thank you, Mix Rio. And I'd actually like to put an personal opinion in this on definitely how a grandfather can just steal mangoes and be, in jail, but some old, rich, powerful grandmother is still convicted but still in just wheelchair. Or just for example, on how we have 4Ps, but when you go on the ground, on the field work, you actually just see them trying to, put it on loans. The credit cards are on loans and so whatever. So that we need to fix this system. So thank you for that. For Mix Erica, this is concerns for FOI. What is your organization stand on politicians who do not release their SALNs publicly?
Well, that's actually what our challenge is aims to answer, no? So we actually we're launched, just a quick background, that we're launching a dashboard to track this and to actually put pressure on them to release them and ask the question, why is it, what's the reason of not releasing it in the first place? So yeah, that's it.
So FYI is pushing forth and putting pressure on this, politicians or governmental position to release their SALNs. And I think there's a related question on the Menti. Number one is, do you think that forwarding the FOI in itself is already a dangerously political move in itself, as we are aware of the implications of corruption and bureaucracy being exposed to the public?
Well, I think if you look at it as a difficult reform to pass, well, it is actually dangerous. But if you look at it as a tool to combat corruption, then it makes it even more powerful to do it, and to actually gain and support from the coalition and the advocates.
Yes. All right. So the more the people in power, like the people sitting in power, fears a certain movement, fears a certain tool, it means that there is much power in people. And I just really love that. Anyway, thank you again, Mix Erica. There's also a question here. I think this now relates to our systemic change that we're trying to make, Mix Rio. So from the Menti, as an enthusiast myself, I am eager to learn more about data, but I feel that I cannot share this same sentiment with others. As such, how do you think this eagerness to be interested in data analytics and data science in general could start at an early age?
We had the organization conducted a data science talk for in Qatar, and they were young adults. They were like 11 years old, 12 years old, and 13 years old. And how you would be able to empower or to engage those types of people is basically to relate to their perspectives. I mean, when we went there, you wouldn't talk about highly technical stuff. You wouldn't talk about, say, job experiences or like highly technical terms. We wouldn't do that, but rather we would try to assume the perspective of your audience. And the audience there were youth. And how would you engage the youth? By sharing relatable experiences to them, like in the context of their academics, how is data being used in education? How is data being used in a family setting? I mean, you'll try to be creative in tailor fitting your narrative to the one you're engaging with. And as a youth, also, you'd be able to empower your fellow youth by making any issue close to one's heart, or as what you would call it, close to one's stomach. I mean, because I think that's a challenge for any advocacy. How do you make anybody believe in what you're fighting at? And the way for you to make your advocacy fly is for it to be as relatable as possible. You wouldn't just stop at figures. You wouldn't just stop at or even data itself, but rather you'll talk about relatable implications and applications of what you're fighting with. I mean, if you want somebody to believe that the environment should be protected, you wouldn't just say about, oh, there is a high carbon footprint. Let's reduce it. Nobody would get convinced to reduce carbon footprint. But talk about do you know that because of our high carbon footprint, there is in fact a lot of research being conducted which tries to correlate why the magnitude of storms right now in the Philippines are of that greater effect than previously. They're trying to relate that because of higher carbon footprint and carbon emissions. I mean, simple as that. Right? There's an effect, blah blah blah, that might affect you. And similarly, on the topic of data science, you would talk about the relatable applications of data science. I mean, you wouldn't say right then and there advocacy. You wouldn't say right then and there this is for the work or for the job. But rather, you'll try to personalize it on the interest of whom you're talking with. And if it's the youth, I mean, whomever that person would who ask that you're interested with data, but you're scared that data that your insights might not necessarily be agreed upon by other people. The answer to that is that there is communication. I mean, that's the reason why these types of communities exist. Uh, in our discipline, for example, in data science, we do not always agree. I mean, at the end of the day, you have different approach on how you'll arrive at a certain outcome. And maybe it might always be the case that your perspective might be different from me, but at the end of the day, there is beauty in being able to exchange our ideas, in being able to see different ends of a coin. And I think that in itself should say inspire you, or it should push you to join this community, not just in AYDS, but in different types of communities. Because that's the beauty of being able to share your perspective to other people. Your idea gets empowered, you get to learn other things, and in the end, you get to self-evaluate your perspectives as well. I mean, why is it that my perspective is different? And how should I relate to other people? And those are the questions that you would be able to answer, like joining this different community.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mix Rio. So I also do think that there is a need for an introductory phase. How would at an early age a young ones would be eager to learn data analytics if from the first place they do not have access to know what this really is? So I'm also thinking, just correct me if I'm wrong, would it be better also to have this on our curriculum in the schools or maybe in the society, Mix Rio? What do you think? Like there's a part also for data science.
If I'm not mistaken, the DepEd is actually conducting some initiatives related to it. I think that they're trying to incorporate on technical education. And there are also initiatives from DepEd, which aims to acknowledge that it's not just a formal education that we should give a look at, but also on skills, on skills qualification. For example, I've had previously worked for Philippine Qualifications Framework, for example, and what that policy aims to acknowledge is that we recognize lifelong learning, and part of lifelong learning is your data science skills and then your computer skills, and that this aims to um, acknowledge that it is not just through formal education, but rather we'd also give acknowledgement to the non-formal types of skills that we have. I mean, your nanay who are experts at cooking. I mean, that is a lifelong learning skill. That's an example of it. I mean, those that are highly gifted. I mean, those creative layouts. I mean, we have people who did not have formal education but have that, and there is initiatives, or there are initiatives rather that are already being implemented. But I think the challenge is on how we'll be able to empower these and make it more known and more
All right. Thank you again, Mix Rio, for that input. And to anyone, to someone who asked that question and how can they help the younger age, start it with yourself. Your actions, your words, your influence create an impact. Even if it's just one person that you encourage, that counts. Because no, there is no small effort here. This is a collective movement. So I hope that answered your question. So Mix Erica, maybe you can go answer this first. When policies are not being, this is general, when policies are not being enforced, is there anything that a youth like me can do?
There's actually so much the youth can do. So since we're talking about FOI and data here, so I think it all starts with FOI. Kapag may hindi na ipapasa or may hindi na-enforce or implemented ng maayos, what can we do is to ask the implementers or the agency who is responsible implementing for such policies or project, anong nangyayari, bakit? And I think if there's so much voice and clamor for this, I think meron at meron tayong magagawa para to move an action, to move a policy into an action. So, at sana lang hindi mapagod yung mga youth kasi there are advocacies talaga na frustrating, nakakaubos ng effort and energy, but I think the challenge here is to really stand strong and laging isipin kung bakit ba natin to ginagawa in the first place. So, I think that's my take that answer.
All right, thank you, Mix Erica. And I think just a side note, hindi mapapagod yung youth. Meron tayong tinatawag na kape. Ayan, kapit sa kape. All right, so Mix Rio on the input here. Again, the question is, when policies are not being enforced, is there anything that a youth like me can do?
Yes, make it. And I think it's one of the ways similar to what freedom of information. Because the bad people, I mean, to make the story more simple, bad people are afraid whenever people know what they're doing. And it goes a long way to a lot of things. I mean, FOI, one of an example, making it out there. Example, I recall when a certain senator tried to propose removing Andy Rice and rather using Andy Kangkong. And then a lot of people who were enthusiasts of Andy Rice voiced out against that discussion, that initiative, and that ultimately changed the stance of that policymaker. Or when a certain policymaker also did not want to invest on research, it became a talk of the town. It became trending. And that policymaker immediately apologized for such remarks. So ultimately, we have power, and the power of the people is actually on calling them out and holding our leaders accountable. So collectively, we must not forget that we have the power, and we just need to be united in in maximizing whatever power that we have, be it be legalistically, um, joining such formations or initiatives that would help us achieve our goals, or as simple as whenever you see something wrong, call it out. I mean, in a proper way, because something's wrong. I mean, something wrong should not be tolerated. It should be called out. I mean, I think that's also a problem in our society right now. A lot of people are afraid to speak about the truth because they're afraid that their truth may not be the popular ones. But that has always been the case. I mean, the youth before us long fought for the different freedoms that we have right now. And I think it's a disservice to them if we choose to be silent now. I mean, we must continue the challenge and take up that role to always speak and assert the truth. Yeah, that's my answer. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mix Rio. And I think to our participants here in Zoom and to all our watchers in our live streams, one example is the recent trend of tumindig. I think that one is the very best example of what we are trying to speak out about here. So the tumindig artwork starts from one. It was just simply an expression of support to loving the Philippines to and become a wake-up call to all our creatives and all of those. So I think one misconception is that we think our civil and societal participation is homogeneous. We always think that it's one fit mold all. You need to join rallies, you need to become politically active on Facebook. But we need to, this is a spectrum. We need to appreciate diversity, and as mentioned by Mix Rio and Mix Erica, anything that you can do on your power, as long as you think it's right, it's your truth, do it. Because one way or another, it will impact others. So just a time check, it's 4:03 p.m. And as of the moment, we can only accommodate one question. This is the last question. So I think this is more on the data analytics. There are instances wherein we see biased information online. For example, the survey polls and the like. So how do we combat them if we do not have the means to recheck them?
Well, that is an assertion. I mean, before you are able to arrive that, you also have at the end of the day another assumption on your mind that you want to go up there. But it's much more complicated than that. I mean, at the end of the day, data science is another discipline in a similar way that we have education, we have the creatives, we have the law, which at the end of the day, you could always assume to be biased and you could always assume to be not fitting to one's perspective. But for me, how you'd be able to do that is in again in making your perspective known. I mean, if you believe that that certain post is not how it really is, then back up your claim, share your thoughts, share your perspectives out there for you to be able to challenge whatever is being put out there. Because um, like similar to the law may be um, just, the law may be legal, but it may not necessarily be fair. I mean, it might affect other stakeholders and might put other stakeholders to the losing end. That's also similar to how data science. I mean, when you report a certain um, analysis, it might not necessarily fit to our liking. It might not necessarily fit to our assumption. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of how we want to, or what action. I mean, going back to the discussion, what actions would you like to undertake given this insight? I mean, I understand. I mean, I of course, I kind of get where we're guys pointing at, but there is actually a danger as well if we try to always assume that these tools are possibly biased or whatnot, because instead of that mindset, we could rather adopt a mindset how we're going to challenge result, or how are we go, what action should we take to change the outcomes. I mean, and favor it towards one side, because at the end of the day, we will never have one result or one decision that all of the stakeholders would like. But again, it's a matter of how would you voice out your perspective, putting it out there. I mean, representation. Always talk about your story, always talk about your perspective, and being responsible. Bakit? That's, I think.
All right, thank you, Mix Rio and Mix Erica. So I am afraid we ran out of time, and with that, we are officially ending our open forum here. So again, thank you for participating, Mix Rio and Mix Erica, such insightful inputs, and so all our participants who sent in their questions as well. So that was definitely a fruitful discussion, and I hope your questions have been answered. And I think they have been also projecting on their slides and even on their virtual backgrounds how you can reach them. So just confirming, Mix Rio and Mix Erica, can they reach you out for their further questions? Is it okay?
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. So FYI and AYDS is open for your inquiries. So maybe later or tomorrow, if there's still something that bugs you, you can reach out to them for your questions. So again, thank you to everyone who participated in our open forum. So now, may we call on our committee head for this event, Camille Camba, because for sure, this day won't end without showing our appreciation to our speakers.
Okay. Thank you po kay Mix Erica and kay Mix Rio. So this certificate of appreciation is awarded to Mix Erica J. Navelgas of FOI Youth Initiative for their fruitful contribution to Youth in Action this day, February 26, 2022. Signed by Committee Head Camille Gamba and ETC President Hannah Mejilla. Okay, I'll screenshot po. Okay. 1, 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next. This certificate of appreciation is awarded to Mix Rio Dayao of Asia Pacific Youth Data Society for their fruitful contribution to Youth in Action this day, February 26, 2022. Signed by Committee Head Camille Gamba and ETC President Hannah Mejilla. Okay, I'll print screen again. Okay. 1. Thank you so much po.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mix Camille Camba. So again, can we give our speaker, both Mix Rio and Mix Erica, a Zoom round of applause? And also to our live streamers, please show us a heart, a like if you all enjoyed the open forum, the discussion, and everything that happened today. All right, I'm seeing a lot of applause, hearts. Thank you so much. And on behalf of everyone here in this room, again, thank you, Mix Rio and Mix Erica, for such an educational and insightful talk. So before this event ends, let us take this opportunity to capture this moment. So may I request everyone, if you truly learned a lot, can you show us your biggest smile and reveal your faces? Because we now have our photo up. So calling someone from our team to take the photo, and we'll give you a minute or two to open your camera.
I'll do it na lang. Can someone, ayan, okay. Let's wait muna for them.
Yes, guys. So please don't be shy. Please turn on your cameras. Be proud to be part of the youth and the generation that will bring and change. Be proud. Show us your faces. And it's so nice to see lovely people in this room. All right. Can you please turn on your cams? Mix Camille, whenever you're ready.
But onti-onti atang may nag-open, so let's wait a little bit na lang.
Okay, while we're waiting, can I ask you, Mix Camille, what's your favorite part of this event?
Siguro sa akin, yung Q&A, since super haba. So, I don't mean na mahaba, but it's like fruitful yung discussion, and yung speakers natin ay napaka-quick in answering the questions, ganun. Parang ora-orada, may sagot agad sila. And
Ayan.
super energetic pa rin despite now more than 1 hour na tayo nagdi-discuss dito.
Yeah, from our convener, Ora Orada. And we love that because our speakers greatly showed their expertise by showing us comprehensive inputs. All right, so guys, sinasegue lang namin kayo, pero please, bukas na ng cam. Please. We're requesting everyone to please turn on their cam. So maybe Mix Kimil, you can now have our photo up.
Okay na ata. So ayan, I have 3 panels with me. First panel, 1, 3. Thank you. Isa pa for first panel. First panel, 1, 2, 3. Okay, second panel. 1, 2, 3. Another one for second panel. 1, 2, 3. Okay, last panel. 1. Last one. 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mix Kimil. And ayan, hindi po talaga napapagod ang kabataan. Tingnan nyo, gano'ng katagal mag-smile. Walang pasintabi kung tapos na tayo, di ba? So, smile lang. So again, a gentle reminder to get your certificates. The link is sent on our chat box by Brian Custodio. Again, if you want your certificates, fill up our evaluation form in the comment box. So thank you again to our speakers. Now a couple of reminders that tomorrow we will be having our workshop on advocacy campaigning and position paper writing. As such, we would like to remind everyone to please be here tomorrow. And with that, that ends our day 1 of Youth in Action. And to receive again your certificates, please fill up the evaluation form in our chat box. So again, I am Josh, your host for this afternoon, now signing off. Thank you so much. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you, guys.
And enjoy the rest of the days of Youth in Action. Yes. So everyone, please be here before 2 p.m. again tomorrow. Thank you so much. See you all tomorrow on this same link. Yes, and I can't express this much thank you to our speakers.
Andiyan po ba sila? But thank you po.
Nandito pa sila.
Thank you so much po. Thank you po kay Ate Erica and kay Kuya Lil.
Thank you so much. So everyone, you may now leave this call. Yeah. And also thanks to our partners for making this event possible. We'll still have day 2 and day 3 of Youth in Action, so stay tuned.